Welcome to So Many Receipts. I'm Flo Michelle, former entertainment editor and lifelong reality TV addict, unpacking the tea from Farmer Wants a Wife, Real Housewives, Bravo and beyond. Let's get stuck in. Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. I am back from my week away. I actually went with my family to Uluru in Australia's Red Centre in the Northern Territory, a bucket list destination. If you haven't been, honestly, you have to go. It is just incredible to see Uluru and Katajuta up close, and the Field of Light show and the Windjerry drone show. Everything just took my breath away. And there I was last Monday night after this magical day thinking, should I watch Farmer Wants a Wife on my phone so I'm not too far behind when I get back? And yes, I did. Imagine traveling thousands of kilometres to one of the most spectacular natural wonders on Earth, only to spend the evening checking whether to see Farmer Dylan was going to snog anyone else. Some people come back from Uluru spiritually enlightened, but I came back knowing exactly who got dumped. So we've now heard that Farmer is due to end next week, making it just a short 5-week run. You know, I like a short run, especially when you compare it to the sheer slog of MAFS, which goes on for 3 months. It's actually quite a relief to get these people out of your brain as fast as possible. However, this Farmer season has not gone well. There's been a lot of complaining from viewers that the cast were just too young, too silly. The show's not what it once was. And I'll be giving you more of my opinion about that next week after the finale. So one of the main things that bugged me all season and bugged the hell out of a lot of other people too was this question. Why didn't Farmer Wants a Wife show us any actual farming? Was hardly any of it. I feel like we've been catfished. Viewers have been absolutely mystified. It's been one of the biggest talking points this year in the forums. All we really saw was Eddie, the lawyer, sweeping out the mushroom room, which, judging by her face once she wrenched off her gas mask, wasn't exactly a lifelong dream. Then again, she didn't seem too keen on Farmer Alex either, because she's already moved on with a handsome Frenchman named Mathis. How embarrassing, right? Alex told her, "I'm in love with you," at that final, was it a rose ceremony? And she just kind of went, "Oh, okay, I think I'm getting there." So anyway, she's now living in Brisbane and has a new job at a law firm. Was farm life ever really on her vision board? And then we saw poor Kimberly, who bravely got covered in cow manure. She was the only lady game enough to even go near a cow on Farmer Jason's farm. And for all her troubles, he gave her the boot just a few hours later. And that was about it for the farming scenes. I mean, maybe the lesson this year was just don't touch the cows. So instead of farm life, we had daggy dates, country fairs, dramatic walkouts, fights about jealousy, who's hotter, plus the reading out loud of someone's secret diary. But where was the farming? Surely that's one of the biggest parts of this whole experiment. Can you hack the lifestyle? Can you actually picture yourself living 2 hours away from the nearest Kmart? Would you be happy if your husband disappeared for 14 hours because a water pump broke? And can the women really continue their careers if they move to a country town? Are they prepared to start all over again? So these important questions and discussions were either super brief or non-existent. So here's something else I found. According to the ABS, more than 16,000 women working in Australian agriculture are actually unpaid contributing family members. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of farmers' wives actually do pitch in behind the scenes. Maybe they're doing the books or driving a tractor, or maybe they're sticking their hand up a cow's backside like we saw on Farmer Jack's farm in Tassie. They used to show us more of this. So what happened? Because that stuff actually tells you whether their relationships have a chance or not. It's a pretty good indicator, right? Because it's all well and good to flirt with someone over fairy floss at the local fair, but I want to know whether any of the ladies would still be smiling if they were helping move cattle in 38-degree heat. That's the compatibility test I want to see. Now, before I go on with more farmer fluff, everyone's still talking about the reunion episodes of The Real Housewives of Rhode Island, which just aired. Bravo put grabs up on their TikTok page, and some of them are getting like 4 million views, more than any other show, which is just mind-blowing. Rhode Island has well and truly exceeded all expectations in its first season. However, I was pretty surprised to hear the star of the show, Liz McGraw, is leaving after just one season until I started digging and discovered the whole messy backstory. And now I'm not surprised at all that she's bailing. So, Liz said her leaving had nothing to do with legal issues surrounding her good friend Dino Guilmette, but I spent hours and hours of my life trying to untangle this complicated, crazy mess until it all finally made sense to me. Honestly, I needed a whiteboard, but here is the gist. So, Dino's heading to trial for alleged distribution of prescription meds, along with allegations of fraudulently obtaining COVID relief money. So, what's that got to do with Liz? Well, according to court documents, Rhode Island State Police acted on intel from an informant who alleged Liz was fronting cash to Dino for a criminal operation. Police said that justified them wiretapping Dino's phone. They recorded more than 1,000 calls between Dino, Liz, and her husband Jerry. They haven't elaborated on the details, but investigators did pick up the communication linked to the pills and the COVID fraud, but exactly who that was discussed with, we don't know. Now Dino's lawyer is arguing the info used by police may be unreliable and is challenging how the wiretap warrants were obtained. Liz has not been charged with any crime and strongly denies any wrongdoing. She says she's leaving to concentrate on family, put out an Instagram statement saying it has nothing to do with being afraid of skeletons in her closet or jail. But at Dino's trial, her name is still expected to come up in court to explain the wiretapping in the first place, which most likely explains why she's stepping away from the show. I don't believe anybody like stars or politicians when they say, oh, I'm stepping away to spend more time with their family. No, they're not. Never did. Never wanted to. I think Bravo and Liz were praying Dino would take a plea deal, but he didn't. Now it's going to trial, and the last thing she probably wants to discuss is Dino and this legal drama and have that be her main storyline next season. Because how could Bravo not cover it, right? Remember how irate Erica Jane got when the ladies on Beverly Hills kept asking her about Tom's case and what she knew? And Dino's backstory is so messy as well. I'm very certain she doesn't want to talk about Dino. We know he dated Kelsey, but he also shares a child with Shayana Jenkins, who is the ex-fiance of Aaron Hernandez, and she shares another child with him. Liz is probably completely fed up with anything to do with this man. Plus, Liz and Jerry run their very successful cannabis business. They probably don't want any reputational fallout to come from this, right? So it kind of makes sense to me why she's stepping away. And I do think that's a shame because she was a standout. She was so entertaining on the show. I will miss her Dolores double act, but maybe she'll be back the season after or down the track. They tend to do that now, don't they? They bring back old housewives. So in the meantime, they already started filming next season. I think there's still more than enough drama to sustain the show without Liz, even if she's not there. I do like Joellen. I love a big mouth, honestly. And I'm sure she is now the queen bee. I love how she keeps challenging Rula about her weird marriage to Brian. Also, Alicia is very naturally ditzy funny. She reminds me a bit of Kathy Hilton. They're pretty good, those types of characters on these shows. So some people have also been saying there's too many young women in the cast. I agree. I think they could do without Ashley. I think she added the least to the show. I don't think they'll get rid of her, but I do think they should add a new older woman to replace Liz, not a younger one. You know, Bravo has this obsession of wanting to attract younger viewers to the Housewives franchise with younger castmates. But I don't understand the panic. The show's demographic has always been middle-aged, older women. That's who it's about. That's who it's for. Bravo has the younger shows like Summer House and The Valley. Don't worry about Housewives. We don't need 20-somethings and 30-somethings on Housewives telling us about life. We already know about life, okay? There are plenty of us older Bravo, Hey You viewers, happily sitting on the couch with a nice cup of tea, judging everyone's life choices. So, Andy, are you listening? So back to Farmer. And did you know that the cast are reportedly paid just $80 a day for filming? Honestly, after watching this season, that feels like slave labor. Some women got zero airtime or had to play a pretty humiliating second, third, or fourth fiddle. According to a leaked contract, filming can stretch 10 to 12 hours and up to 8 weeks, putting the hourly rate well below minimum wage. Now, of course, nobody goes on a reality dating show to get rich unless you're chasing influencer deals afterwards. People sign up for the experience, right? But as a former entertainment editor, I've asked this before in interviews. Can contestants actually afford to be there? At $560 a week, that is barely enough to cover your rent while you're away. So, former farmer contestant Sophie Trethewin, she got together with Dustin from the show. She's still with him. She said she was paying a mortgage during filming, still paying the mortgage, and heavily dipped into her savings for outfits, hair, and makeup. Mel from MAFS said a similar thing. She said their cast this year were paid about $140 a day, slightly higher, plus $175 weekly for groceries. But she still spent around 8 grand of her own money on top of that. We know Beck said she also forked out 20 grand in total. That just wasn't for her clothes. Look, at this point, getting dumped is almost the cheaper option, right? Plus, Mel said aside from filming for about 6 weeks, she also had to take another 3 weeks off work to recover from the trauma, just to lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, and also had to dip into her savings. So she was off work, I'm guessing, for about 9 weeks. That's a long time. I think if you're away that long, you'd have to take some of it as unpaid leave. I don't think your employer would be happy to just pay you indefinitely. But at least Mel got a lot of airtime, even if it was awful. Imagine the girls who maybe quit their job to go on Farmer and then Channel 7 just showed the back of their head twice. Many people simply can't take too much time off work or quit or cope with a reduced income for weeks and months on end. So there might be reality TV gold out there, but we'll never see it if people just can't afford to apply. Now, speaking of maths, if I have to, I was having a bit of a LinkedIn snoop recently, as you do, and I was genuinely happy to see that Rachel has started a new job as a customer care specialist. Good for you, Rach. I actually think she was one of the accidental casualties of this season with Steve-O, the whole mismatch situation. Unfortunately, people probably do still remember her because of that whole finger bang storyline. I remember she told Abby Chatfield on her podcast afterwards that men were coming up to her at train stations and literally yelling finger bang at her. I mean, oh God, can you imagine? Rachel had been a respected team leader prior to the show. How do you even sit across from a hiring manager knowing that they probably watched the show and maybe finger banging is what they associate you with? I also read in an article this week about Olivia Fraser from MAFS, who just got married for real in the UK. Remember Olivia? She had that huge falling out with Domenica a few seasons ago over the whole glass smashing incident. So Olivia went from being cast as the nice girl to the villain after that. And she said she basically had to move to the UK to reinvent herself after the show because before maths, she had been studying to be a teacher. But after what happened on screen, she felt that the chance of her getting hired as a teacher in Australia might be pretty slim. And she's probably not wrong there. Look, whether you liked her on maths or not, that's still a pretty enormous life consequences just from a TV program. In Farmer Wants a Wife job news, Clarette from last season also recently resigned from her teaching job. She moved to Thomas's remote farm in South Australia last year and got a job at a school more than an hour away. That's a 2 hour round trip every day. That would have been really hard. There's been speculation maybe it had something to do with Thomas, maybe they've broken up, but I haven't seen anything to confirm that. Perhaps she just couldn't hack the long drive anymore and is now doing something from their home. So, in terms of all this job fallout, of course, people will say, well, they knew what they were getting themselves into. And there's definitely some truth to that. I just wish more of these people with actual respectable professions and career ambitions thought that through more. Of course, a lot of the cast probably do hope reality TV will lead to influencing or media opportunities, but influencing isn't the easy fallback career anymore. It's actually now really hard being an influencer, I reckon. The market is saturated. Brands are far more selective than they were only 5 years ago. You have to constantly create content, negotiate deals, and stay relevant. It's a full-time job and not everyone can make a living from it. Also, as the MAFS cast saw this year, none of them are getting the huge follower counts compared to cast from years gone by. Not only do they now have to survive the edit, they also have to now survive the algorithm. And I just think reality TV isn't the flex it once was. What happens after the cameras stop rolling is often the part that no one really thinks about. Getting your old life back might be harder than surviving the actual experiment. So, finishing up with story time this week, and it's actually a bit of a sad one. I was flicking around the TV on the weekend, and by complete chance, I came across something on the ABC called Deep End, the Scott Miller story. It's a new two-part documentary series that is also on ABC iView. So, in part one, it looks a bit at Scott's relationship with his ex wife, Charlotte Dawson, who I actually knew, although only slightly, through my time working as an entertainment journalist at NW magazine a few decades ago. But firstly, of course, Scott Miller was one of Australia's greatest ever swimmers. He won Olympic medals. He was one of the biggest names in sport. But unfortunately, after his swimming career ended, his life really unraveled. Like so many elite athletes, Scott really struggled with what came next. Swimming had been his whole identity, and once that was gone, he really didn't know what to do for a career or who he even was. And this is still a huge issue today. Athletes dedicate their entire lives to this one thing, and then one day it's over. I think it's particularly hard here in Australia because it's not like the US, where many ex athletes remain huge celebrities. They land big sponsorships and speaking gigs, and they continue to earn a living basically from their sporting profile. In Australia, for most athletes, once their career ends, it's back to normal life, whatever that means. And Scott found that transition incredibly difficult. He talks openly about battling anxiety and mental health issues. Eventually, he went down a very dark path. He became involved in illegally distributing prescription meds, and his life spiraled. He was eventually arrested in an undercover sting operation and spent 3 years in jail. The positive part of the story is that he's been out for a few years now. He's clean and appears to have turned his life around, which is really great to see. And I liked his honesty and vulnerability in this. So back to Charlotte. Now, this doco also reflects on their stormy relationship. They were only married for about a year. And I actually knew Charlotte a little bit because when I worked at NW magazine here in Sydney, she was the fashion editor at Woman's Day. I still remember the day that we were alone in the lift together and we started chatting, and I introduced myself and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm Fleur from NW." And she said, "Oh, well, by the way, I'm Charlotte from Women's Day." And whenever we'd bump into each other from that point, we'd always have a little chit chat. In one conversation, I remember she had to organize this fashion shoot about budget woman's jeans. And she said, "Oh, these jeans are all so ugly." Because they were, and that really made me laugh. So she then left to freelance, and I never saw her again in person. Then she suddenly popped up on TV in 2007 as one of the judges on Australia's Next Top Model. And I watched her every season for the next 6 years. I loved that show, and I thought she was great TV. And she became known as the outspoken, sometimes harsh judge, a bit like the villain of the panel. I remember actually being kind of surprised at that because although I didn't know her well, that wasn't the impression I had of her. I thought she just seemed very down to earth and warm whenever I'd spoken with her. So later on, Charlotte said producers really leaned into that villain edit and that she also played it up because she knew that was what the show wanted. One thing I didn't know about was Scott's friendship with broadcaster Alan Jones. At that time, he was very close to Alan, who became something of a mentor to him. But Scott describes Alan as being quite possessive and says he wasn't very happy about Scott's relationship with Charlotte. Scott implied that on some level, moving in with Charlotte and eventually marrying her was actually a way of escaping Alan. Yikes. So, anyway, Scott and Charlotte did have a very tumultuous relationship. They both badmouthed each other in the press after they split. But in this doco, Scott only spoke with kindness and affection about her. Then it revisits 2014 when Charlotte tragically decided that she didn't want to be here anymore and she chose to depart this earth. I was just so shocked and sad when I heard. I've actually thought about it quite often over the years. And while she'd struggled with her mental health for years, One thing I do remember very clearly around that time was how much online abuse she was receiving. People who'd watched Australia's Next Top Model had developed this really intense dislike for her. They would leave horrible comments on her Facebook page, and Charlotte would often engage with them, replying and arguing back. Looking back, it clearly wasn't doing her mental health any favors. Not long before she passed away, she'd had a long exchange with a troll and wrote, "Okay, you win." And at the time, those words sounded really ominous, and now they're just heartbreaking. Now, I'm certainly not saying social media or the show caused what happened. Mental health is incredibly complicated. No one single thing explains it. But I also don't think that level of relentless online abuse would have helped her state of mind. Think about it. On MAFS, you might be the villain for a season, but she was the villain judge for 6 years. Some media personalities gave comments afterwards, and one person who'd only just seen her said Charlotte told them that she'd be getting a lot of online hate. And this person said, "Oh, just don't read the comments. Don't look at those posts." But I think that's easier said than done. I do think it's hard not to look. It's hard not to take it personally. Now, this doco certainly doesn't go into that side of things at all. But seeing Charlotte again on screen, it did make me think about reality TV because I've talked now quite a bit about villain edits. I think they're even more intense now than they were back then. And it's actually quite scary because someone can think they'll be portrayed one way and the audience can end up seeing something completely different. Talking about Mel from Maths again, Mel in one interview said she genuinely thought that she'd get a positive edit because she'd always been the nice girl. She never imagined she'd be portrayed as one of the biggest villains this season. And listen, I know it's not all about the edit. People still say appalling things that they shouldn't. But we're often not seeing a lot of the context behind this stuff. And yet, all we can judge is what we see presented on screen. I honestly think that anyone going on reality TV now has to be very, very mentally strong. You simply don't know what's going to happen during filming. You don't know how you'll be edited. You don't know how social media will react. And once it's out there, it is out of your control. Is it really worth it? So seeing Charlotte again was a reminder that there are real people behind these TV characters we sit at home discussing. And I do think that's something worth remembering. Anyway, that's all from me. I will catch up with you again next week.